All right. Hi, Shon.
Hi, Christina.
Thank you for joining me today. So my name is Cristina. I'm the CEO here at Pandium. This is Shon. He's my co-founder and CTO of Pandium, and we operate in the integration space. And as such, we spend a lot of time internally thinking and talking about things related to integrations and security. And also, Shon and I have known each other now for well over a decade and worked together that entire time. And we also spend a lot of time independent of the team talking about some of this stuff. And this conversation that we have been having over the past few days, we thought was kind of interesting, and maybe someone else would be interested in some of our thoughts. We're interested in your thoughts. So we decided to record a little bit of the chats that we've been having about the Salesloft Drift breach. And just to start this off, Shon and I both have no affiliation with either of those companies. We don't know anyone that works there. We have no inside information, absolutely nothing. Everything that we're going to talk about here is based on assumptions, our understanding of what's been reported, and our own personal experience. So none of this is gospel. Like, don't come at me. We are really just kind of riffing on this based on the responses of both Salesloft and of the other companies that were compromised. So I'll just give a brief overview. If you are watching this, you probably already know a lot of this, but as an overview, I believe it bubbled up to me. I saw for the first time last week that there was a breach with Salesloft, which is some sort of sales type of product, I think for insights and things of that nature. And at that time, it seemed that the breach was done by, on purpose. There was a threat actor, and it affected the integrations between Drift, which is a chatbot that Salesloft has acquired. I'm not sure when, but it's not a part of their original product, but between Drift and Salesforce. So whenever we see that there's a major security incident as a result of an integration, Shon and I, our antenna goes up just to see hey, what happened? What can we learn from that? And over the coming days up until today, there has been more information coming out about the magnitude of this breach. And it seems that it is not just the Salesforce and Drift integration. It is potentially other integrations to Drift, maybe also to Salesloft, I'm not sure. And that led Shon and I to go down a bit of a rabbit hole together around how could this happen? Right? We, as an integration platform, store a lot of secrets. We deal with this stuff all day, every day. And to me, it sounded like there had been a breach of a core service, and that it wasn't just a phishing campaign or some kind of social engineering to get into one specific account. And as the news has been coming out, we've learned that a good chunk of pretty large companies have been affected by this. They themselves have come out and posted security responses that have been great to read. Really just best in class around some of this stuff. It's been, it's terrible, but it's also been really interesting to read. And the impact of that means that potentially these bad actors had access to, or they did have access to, Salesloft's customers' Salesforce account, and they specifically were looking for and at contact information that lived in that CRM, opportunities, and customer support cases is what I had read. So that means that Cloudflare, as an example, they've said that they were affected by this. Potentially somebody was in the Cloudflare Salesforce instance and was able to see support requests that had come into Cloudflare. So that is an overview of what we understand to have happened. And I'll also say that it is reported that this breach was taking place from the 18th to the 30th.
I think August 18th is when Google figured it out. They, in their statement, they said August 10th to August 18th.
Sorry,
but
10th to 18th.
Then, and this is part of some of the confusion here, is I don't think Salesloft acknowledged it till the 26th, and that's part of the timeline here is a little bit, and is a part of I think the mystery here.
Yeah, and to be clear, again, we don't know anyone at these places. This is not a thing to pass blame. We're looking at this, from our own morbid curiosity. Shon has done talks on OAuth too. We think about this stuff a lot. Just trying to understand the order of operations. This is a pretty large breach if these folks were able to get access to, it sounds like, the actual authentication tokens that are associated with the Salesforce et al. Accounts.
And it's specifically those OAuth tokens that really perk my interest, because the vast majority of what worries me at night is our secrets engine getting stolen, which it sounds like our secrets database, which it sounds like what happened here in some sense. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was like the way that at least the mainstream technical journalists, but not actual technical people have been talking about this. They've just been saying like OAuth token, and like this one token sort of like allowed access to everything. And that's not how OAuth works. And it's sort of been, that's really been like what drove us here. And then I think it was also yesterday, and this is just coming as like a software engineer. I think Drift took down all their software, or like Salesloft said, hey, we're turning off Drift for now. And we don't know when we're coming back, which is like that is an interesting choice.
It's a scorched earth.
And
it's a
scorched earth. They're just burning it all down and going to start again. And I think it talks a little bit about maybe some of the problems they were facing. And I don't think this is like unique to them. This is something that OAuth is very hard. Writing integration platforms that protect everyone's data is very hard. And I think like you'll see like a lot of companies will not put the importance on the integrations necessarily. They think they're just like secondary things and may not put their most important people on them, may like think like they could just hire it out, intern it, and then you end up with crazy hacks like this where something really went wrong. I think multiple things.
Yeah, it like we can, I'm sure, talk forever about like how hard it is to do this correctly, but it reminds me, we've talked to so many companies that like are still running stuff that like an intern built years ago, and nobody really knows how any of this stuff works or where stuff is stored. Again, I have no idea if that's the case here, but it definitely like that kind of as you said, like piques my interest. So as we were looking at the various sources that were reporting on this, and we found a couple, like one really good video that maybe we'll drop the link to in the comments. As Shon said, they kept talking about like the token, like there was an OAuth token somewhere. And Shon and I were slacking at like 8:00 at night. Like, have you seen this? Did you read this? That doesn't really make sense that it was like a token that got into everybody's Salesforce. So we, being the weirdos that we are, we're trying to figure out like, what do we think happened here? So to speculate, as Shon sort of alluded to, like my thought is that a bad actor was able to get into whatever vault these guys are using to store all these OAuth tokens.
Secret.
Yeah, the secrets database.
Vault is one type of that, but yeah.
Yeah. I meant Vault like more as like the conceptual thing.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no. They're a secrets database, right? And they were able to do that in production. And they must have done it in production to get all of these keys that are going into production accounts. And they were almost certainly not interacting with a backup because the way that OAuth works, these tokens become invalid in some instances. So we'll talk a little bit about that and how this was possible. But these tokens are like constantly being shuffled around and like being updated and like people are logging in and out. So there could have been a backup that was like very recent, but I think it is more likely that they went straight to prod than like got in and then found a backup. Either way, it sounds like they were able to either make a copy of or export or whatever all of these OAuth tokens. And then when they were making requests to these systems, we'll go with Salesforce, they're able to bypass a lot of like the two-factor authentication and things of that nature because they already have the keys, right? They're not generating the keys. That's where we landed. Shon, I think you agree with me.
I agree with you. I agree with you on almost all of it. I think it could be a backup. And this gets into the nuance of like, how was this OAuth 2, how were these tokens managed? In an ideal world, and this was a talk I just gave earlier in July, like OAuth 2 standards. There's a new version of OAuth 2 coming out, OAuth 2.1, which is really just about collecting all the best practices. And I think if they implemented all those best practices, 100%, they had to get production access. There would have been no way for them to, and then actually keep it alive. I have a feeling though, especially since OAuth 2.1 is still not out, and then just looking at some of the way like Salesforce sets up their OAuth applications, a backup may have worked, and it could have been an older backup.
Especially with Salesforce, as we'll discuss.
Especially with Salesforce. And I don't know, should I get into the details of the nuance here? But basically, when we talk about OAuth tokens, there's two types of tokens. There's access tokens, which are these short-lived keys that allow you to access an API directly. And then there's this thing called a refresh token. And so the idea is like if the access tokens get stolen, they're only alive for 5 minutes or 1 hour. Some are up to 24 hours. It really depends on the system and how you set it up. But we tend to see 10 minutes to 1 hour. normally. What is dangerous, and I think is what happened just because it's the simplest, is when Salesforce issues these keys, by default, unless you change your policies, the refresh token, which is another type of token, this is a thing you use to get new access tokens, never got rotated and never expired. And so you can use the same refresh token to get access tokens, even once the access token expired. And that allows you to just continuously gain access. One of the major requirements for OAuth 2.1 is a refresh token is only usable once. And this is something which is really nuanced, it should be bound. So like, what does that latter thing mean? I think, Cristina, you hit on this more than I did, is it's about IP locking is one of the ways you bound. I don't know if you want to explain that.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of ways, obviously, to like try to secure systems. One way to either secure the system or at least do like anomaly detection, if somebody does have, like if we go back to talking about getting into the vault, so to speak, directly, you can IP lock access to that vault. So only people whose IPs you have registered are able to even get access to that production environment.
This is a little nuance. It's more like Salesforce in this case has been seeing these refresh tokens and access tokens being accessed and used by Salesloft servers. All of a sudden, it changed. Yeah. That is where the binding failed. And that's on Salesforce. And that's on actually almost no one does this in the OAuth 2 world. Like, I don't want to like smirch anyone. And what's really interesting, as a part of this talk, I wanted to go and I was reviewing the docs. I forget, like, Salesforce is an old company. Like, they have been around before authentication as we know it now was a thing, right? And you can look at their docs and see like they have support for all of these, what we would call legacy flows now. And I get a little bit about why it's so hard. Their docs are intense when it comes to how you should do this. And I think some of the fault lies with them. Like they could have locked it down
better.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what I meant about like anomaly detection, right? Is that like, if all of a sudden you're seeing like somebody either trying to get in or somebody getting in coming from a brand new IP, that would be a sign perhaps to take a look. That stuff is not necessarily easy to do, especially if you're looking at really high volume and it's a lot of discrete connections. Like those kind of anomalies, when you do alerting, you got to figure out like what's too chatty that the alerts are not useful and what's useful. And also if they were accessing these accounts on a rolling basis, right? So if
profile low.
Yeah, I don't imagine that what they would have done is go in and all of a sudden take all of those Salesforce tokens that they had stolen and try to auth in immediately, because you can mess up that refresh and get de-authed. You could have people notice and get de-authed. The smart way to do it would have been to like do it on a rolling basis.
Or you're worried about anomaly detection and you just trying to get under the radar. I think
under the threshold.
Yeah, and I think that's part of also why you may be right that they had access to prod, because if they're doing all that access through production, they've joined that network and now they're interfacing, and then they're doing the data grabbing, leaving that in Salesloft's prod, and then only after that downloading it locally. Like none of that would have been detectable by Salesforce. They would have been like, oh, this is just normal stuff. Except, and I think this is another thing, they used a really, this is a thing we ask their customers to have, a bulk API to really like slurp up all this information. And again, going back to Salesforce, had they ever seen bulk API usage from these tokens before? Like, again, I think there's certain behavioral analysis you could do. This is very hard stuff. And it's like, very complicated, but like
at the size that Salesforce is at, like there's
they should have that.
But also there's stuff happening all the time. Like there's always stuff going on, right? And like Cloudflare is a big company in SaaS world, but like are they a big sales company to Salesforce? I don't know, maybe not. Like Walmart's probably a big company to Salesforce. Right?
Google is a Salesforce customer. That blew me away. Like their data was stolen.
But if we look, okay, so like zooming out a little bit, like I think there's a number of places where there was a failure, potentially. Again, we are speculating on all of this. But if it went down similar to this, there was the failure of like the token for Salesloft's vault being out in the world, or somebody getting it through social engineering or like whatever.
Some credentials to allow you to get access to
prod. Have like relevant credentials to get access to prod. Then there was the ability to get access to prod with those credentials, assuming that it wasn't someone internal, right? Like somebody external. It looked like they were using Tor browsers. They have IPs now.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah. Some of the
they were outside. Oh yeah. Wow.
I mean, well, that's so Salesforce shared that because they were able to see it in an audit trail. I don't know.
Right.
I haven't heard anything.
So that goes back to what we were saying, though. Like all of a sudden, there's these IPs coming from Tor.
Think about all the people that have external developers that work on their Salesforce instances.
That's
or
true.
Maybe not, but like, there's all kinds of. So that's the problem. And then there is also the fact that Salesforce itself has a lot of variability in the way that its auth can be configured by the Salesforce admin, right? So this is like the customer is setting this up. And in some instances, it can have very long running access tokens. And I think
by default, if the refresh tokens last forever.
So what that means is that they can basically just keep using those tokens that they grifted until someone manually revokes it, probably by uninstalling the app, or what happened in this instance, I think, was Salesforce went through and invalidated the client ID and client secret for the whole thing, right? Which is exactly what we would want to see happen, right? But it took some time.
Too long.
So there's like alerting that could have happened throughout this entire thing. And there's actually some really interesting details about, as Shon said, some of the technology that these folks used to download all of this information. It's not like native. It's not like making like a GET request against the Salesforce app. But in addition to all of this, and I don't want to make this too long, like what I thought was interesting as well is it's not just Salesforce, right? It's a bunch of other companies that potentially were affected by this in terms of other partner systems. We don't know exactly who yet. But even if we stick with Salesforce, they got all these keys and all these tokens and all this stuff. The people that were using this maliciously still had to know how to use like these tokens. Like this wasn't like just like fly by night kind of thing. Like the fact that they were able to basically use like a skeleton key to get into all of these accounts. Oh, hello. To get into all of we don't like that. To get into all of these accounts, get around the two-factor authentication. Even in the audit trail, it's going to probably say the system user. Like it'll say the user that generated those tokens.
Right.
It'll have a different IP, but it's not going to know that it was a different human, right? It looks like it's coming from the login.
It's a legitimate key. It's what it is. That's the point of them. They're bearer tokens.
It's a really interesting and like hairy type of breach. And I am actually very surprised, and I've said this internally a bunch of times today and over the past few days, I am surprised that I have not heard more about this. It is very lightly on my LinkedIn feed, mostly with competitors to Drift being like, come use us. But if I hadn't already known that something was going on, I would never have thought that was because of a breach. I think part of that is that like, this doesn't affect consumers, so to speak, like directly. It's not like an Experian breach where like everyone knows who that is, but it is like, it's a hairy one, right? And I don't know if anyone fully knows what the entire impact is, right?
I don't know if what if Drift accessed HR records, right? Like, all the employees got.
It's the scopes for that user.
Yeah. And that app could read anything. We looked at their scopes, and it asked for all permissions for read. And I don't know anything about the app. Did it need all that?
But that's so hard, right? Like we all know
scoping so hard.
Permissioning in enterprise systems is like a real pain in the neck. It's like really hard to get right. And a lot of them, as we saw looking at the Salesforce auth, like if you don't have a super user login, you could be trying to play whack-a-mole with even just that auth stuff forever, never mind like the permissions of the user. So like, I get it, right? Like this is like normal stuff. It's not like best case scenario, but it's not uncommon. And so just to wrap us up, and again, part of the reason we're recording this is that we didn't hear anyone talking about it at this level of depth. It's possible that like nobody cares, and that's also fine. And Shon and I will have this forever to look back on. One of the many conversations we've had, hundreds of them. But if you have been a Salesloft or Drift customer, what they have said to do and what I would do is just go in and de-auth everything you've ever connected to them and rotate your API keys. So if it's just an API key, it's like a copy-pasted thing, go into that partner system and generate a new one. Because that's the only way typically it's hard to like de-auth one, right? So just to be safe, go back in, log back into everything. Your Salesforce thing is probably disconnected now anyway, but that's like the safest way, especially for non-OAuth 2 apps, right? Because the partner can't even invalidate you unless they have a list of accounts and keys to 86.
Which sometimes it's harder to get those lists than you realize to people who may not understand it.
What would you advise people to do? Like the users?
I think the user, I think that's right. And I was going to just say like, in more general, like for companies like Drift or people who are building integrations and where it's really integral to your product, like take it seriously. And if I don't want to, I'm not trying to say anything about Drift, but I think it's really important. We are experts in this, and it's 9-10 years of working on this problem, more than 10 years now. We did one of the things we did when we heard about this was actually internally run like hey, what are some things we heard about this hack? How would that have happened here? And it turns up things. You're always going to turn up things. The goal and the goal is to like one, have those open conversations. I think it's really important to be vulnerable and to talk about how can we get hacked. Simple as that. We do that once a quarter. And hey, look at how these things happen. How would that happen here? And like use that to build lessons and to build your defenses and have multiple defenses, right? And try to keep the scopes, like who has access to what low. These are hard problems. It's really easy to say some of this stuff, but man, it's tough.
No, it is. It's super hard. And like, there's another video, and we won't do it here, about like the security situation. I mean, we talked about this on one of our podcasts together, like the situation with all the AI stuff and how so many folks that are not a part of IT teams or tech teams are like are just like authing everything into these agents. And the agent probably does need access if it's going to like answer any question for you. It's going to need access to all of that stuff. But that just opens up a whole new constellation of these secrets and tokens and access management and all that stuff. And like, I don't think there's a great solution to that yet, other than companies just having like really tight like MDM and like really tight barriers on their own systems.
It's multiple.
It's that stuff, but
it's like multiple different things you have to do, right? Just give people access who need access, set up multiple controls. MDM is one of them. Like only computers that are managed have access to any of your servers, which again, that goes, I'm just trying to think if they were using Tor to mask them, how are those computers? How did they have access? I guess you didn't need MDM or something.
We're totally wrong, and this is all like this is a totally different direction, and we just made all this up.
Social engineering, man. You never know.
Yeah, and
they just talk someone in.
There's always something, right? If you dig down deep enough. But I think the goal is to make it really hard to do that and to have as many controls as possible and have as many eyeballs have to look at like catastrophic level things as possible before something bad can happen. But no one's.
But it's also important not to overcorrect, right? That's the balance.
Well, I think I could talk about this like forever. You and I have been like slacking about this for a week every day, finding new stuff and thinking of different kind of paths this could have gone down. But I hope if folks are watching this, if anybody sees this, that this was at least like kind of informative. And if any other like big things come out about this, maybe we'll do an update. But it just felt like a good conversation and also relevant to us and our business and what we do here. Like as I said at the beginning, like that hard-coded secret that you have in that integration from however many years ago, and you've just been continuing to follow those patterns, like that might be quote unquote okay for one customer, but when you have 500, no one's looked at this stuff for years, like that's when these types of things can really come apart. And there's a lot of sensitive data that can be accessed if someone is looking for it and they know how to use it. And these people, whoever did this, definitely knew how to use it and knew exactly what they were looking for and how to get what they wanted quickly. So yeah, it's a wild world out there. It's crazy. Let's talk about OAuth every day. All right, Shon, thank you so much for indulging me in this conversation again.
It's a lot of fun.
Found it interesting. If you care about OAuth, pandium.com. We got all kinds of stuff about all kinds of things. If you don't want to think about OAuth, Pandium, the product, can make it so you don't have to think about it. Make it our nightmare instead of yours. And I will see you all out there. Thanks.